Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. We're going to have Bruce Feldman from The Athletic join us in just a minute. Bruce, one of the foremost college football writers in the country. He was with us just a couple weeks ago previewing the draft. But before we get to that, no Phil. I'm going to give him a blow here. He'll be with me on Quick Slants later. But it's interesting because everybody loves the Patriots draft. You know, you take a sampling of knee-jerk national draft grades, and the Patriots, when they had a consensus of all the grades, and I put this in a column on NBC Sports Boston, they weren't first by a little bit. They were first in a landslide. Now, are these grades an actual predictor of future success? No, not entirely. Last year, the Patriots were 12th on that big board evaluation, and was buoyed mostly by Drake May, Javon Baker, Jalen Polk. May was great. Polk and Baker nowhere to be found. So these grades aren't forecasts. In my mind, and I think in the mind of anyone who pays close attention, is they are evaluations of the real-time decisions made. They're not going to say, oh, that's a great pick, he's going to be an incredible player. It's basically saying, was a player taken too early relative to what the rest of the league thinks? Was he taken on time, the way, for instance, Travion Henderson was? He was ranked about 37th overall by a consensus. He was taken 38th. Or did the team get great value by taking a player well after he should have gone? Phil and I talked about this a lot. Jared Wilson, the center from Georgia, Braden Swinson, the edge from LSU, taken in the 4th and 5th rounds. Unbelievable value on both of those guys. So, and Joshua Farmer, too, I do believe. Yeah, Joshua Farmer, too, the defensive tackle. Great value there. So the Patriots didn't reach. They let the draft come to them. And we've seen in the past drafts panned in real time for the reaches made. 2022, for example, the Patriots were the last rated draft in many people's eyes because of the Cole Strange, Pierre Strong, Tyquan Thornton picks, which were well before anybody else thought the team would go. Basically, the Patriots needed a tackle. They got the top-rated tackle. They needed more juice in their running game with an explosive runner who can catch passes and protect. They got him. They needed a fast wideout who can run past people. They got one of those in Kyle Williams. Needed center depth. They got that with Wilson. He's the highest-rated center in the draft. They needed edge depth. They got that with Braden Swinson. Also, though, they got the right guys as far as Mike Vrabel's concerned. Here's a quote from Ryan Cowden. He spoke Saturday about the kinds of players the Patriots were trying to bring in.
It's this idea, Ian, that from free agency and now through the draft, they're not always going to be perfect and fit exactly to the criteria, but the most that we can sit there and talk about that we're adding guys who love playing football, guys who are great teammates. We all want talented players, we do. But there's an idea here that can't be overstated enough, is that if you don't get the person right, then a lot of that other stuff can go to the wayside. And I think we've been trying to be very intentional about the people, about some of the people to build the foundation that Coach Vrabel and his vision has here for this football team. That started in free agency, and that's been a major emphasis for us as we've gotten into this draft process.
As we've talked about a whole bunch of times, the Patriots' foundational pieces are not really well established, to put it nicely. Even their young players who are on second contracts, you have caveats about the direction they're heading in after a disappointing 2024. You know, Stevenson, Duggar, Onwenu, Keon White's a guy who intimated that he wasn't sure if he was long for New England if things didn't change, but they have changed. They needed to build that core because of the heinous draft yield that they've had. And they've started to do it. They had the worst offensive line in the league last year. Period. End of story. That line now consists of left to right. You got Campbell. You have a combo of Cole Strange. Don't roll your eyes. His first round pick, and I've seen him play decent football. And Layden Robinson. Center, you have Bradbury and the newly drafted kid behind him. You have Onwenu at right guard. You got Morgan Moses at right tackle. You have depth with Caden Wallace. Okay. So to me, you have opportunities for a good offensive line. Good, which would be drastic. They had the worst wide receiver room in the league last year. They've added Stephon Diggs, Mac Hollins, who's a guy who had 50 plus catches for Josh a couple of years ago, McDaniels, and the third rounder, Kyle Williams, who you're going to hear from. Bruce Feldman is one of the guys that he is the player he liked the most in the draft, not to be taken number one overall, but his favorite guy. And then they also added a guy named Efton Chism from Eastern Washington. And we do this a lot, but he is Edelman-esque. He's 5'10", 200, same dimensions as Julian. Didn't play quarterback, did play receiver. And with the ball in his hands, he looks amazingly like Edelman did. So I'm sure that at some point, Josh McDaniels might find a role for him. We're going to talk to Bruce Feldman about him because he's got intel. They were the worst team last year at generating sacks and pressure. They brought in Milton Williams. They brought in Harold Landry. They brought in Braden Swinson, who was a huge value pick in the 5th round. We can put all those players in the hands of an experienced coaching staff with a cogent plan for how they want to prepare, develop, and perform. So that's good. They wanted to change the talent level and the culture. It appears that they have. You know, Mike Vrabel said last month, we won March. Yay, us. I think they might have won April too. Let's bring in Bruce Feldman. As advertised, here is Bruce Feldman from The Athletic. We heard from him a couple of weeks ago, and he's kind enough to take some time because he's busy as hell to join us again. Patriots draft is getting hosannas, and they are coming from everywhere, but you had some as well, Bruce. What did you like about what they did?
You know, I like the first pick. Will Campbell's a really solid, good player. Whether he's as good as Joe Alt last year, I have my doubts on that, but I think he's going to be a start for a decade in the NFL, somewhere on the offensive line, and be really good. It's the 2, 3, and 4 that I was like, ooh, these are great value picks. Travion Henderson, to me, would not shock me if he turned out to be better than Omarion Hampton and maybe even better than Ashton Genty. He is so dynamic and explosive. He is much better in pass protection than Genty is right now. And he's a good receiver out of the backfield. I just think, I don't want to call him like what Jahmyr Gibbs has been for the Lions, but that kind of juice and that kind of wow factor, I think he brings that. Kyle Williams from Washington State, probably my favorite player in the whole draft. I'm not saying he was the best player. I'm not saying he was the best receiver, but there was so much I loved about him. He can play inside, he can play outside. He's quick. He's a really good route runner. He's really tough. Love the football character about it. Where I go with that is last winter, Washington State is playing in the Holiday Bowl. It's a game, unless you're a Syracuse fan, no one's paying attention to it because Syracuse was in it. Washington State, the head coach was long gone. The offensive coordinator left for Oklahoma, took the star quarterback, John Mateer, with him. A bunch of other coaches and players left. Kyle Williams was like the second biggest star next to the quarterback on that team. And he decided to play. I'm playing in the game. He was playing, by the way, for your audience, like the quarterback who was starting was Zevi Eckhouse, who had started his career at Bryant College.
Oh.
And so it's not like you're playing, like this guy hadn't played hardly at all season. So now he's going to play with a quarterback who's been the backup the whole year and never seen, the field outside of somewhere in Rhode Island. And Kyle Williams says, I'm playing. He plays 10 catches, almost 200 yards receiving. But at one point in the second half, he gets hurt and he's in the injury tent. And I'm just thinking, oh man, this sucks for this kid because like he's probably going to be a 2nd or 3rd round pick. And now he gets hurt. Well, it turns out he's fine. And then he comes back in the game. Almost every other kid these days who is in that situation is not coming back in the game. He's like, I don't need an injury scare or whatever. That kid kept on playing, made the game even more interesting. I just think that he's going to be a great fit. And then Craig Woodson from Cal is a really good safety. When I did my draft confidential, multiple coaches I talked to, or DB coaches, really liked him, including one. He was like, don't put all this out there. He said, but I'm hoping he falls to us.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't because the Patriots got him. But the only concern with him was he's a little older.
Yep.
But they loved his film, and I think that's a really good value. And then there's other guys in the further down that I think are, Borregales was a really good kicker for Miami. He was clutch. I think it's a really good draft.
Plus, they got Swinson, who looked like the best value in some ways. The LSU defensive end,
Yeah.
fifth round, 13 and a half
Yeah,
sacks.
started out at Oregon, moved there. I think he's a good player. I think this is a draft where there were so many good edge guys and D linemen. To me, that was the strength of the draft. So I almost think you couldn't go wrong there. And Wilson, is really athletic center. I think he's a good player, and I think, how well does he hold up? We'll see. But he showed at the combine. He's stunningly athletic for that position.
Um, One thing about Williams, and again, you watched him, you scouted him, you evaluated him, you talked to people about him. In my, hey, let me just parachute in as a national football writer will do, or a team writer, beat writer will do, and say, this evaluation says he's got small hands and he has some concentration drops. So I look at that and say, should a Patriots fan be concerned about that? Asking you specifically, who's seen him more than I have?
The one thing that would help him in this, it's Pullman, Washington. The small hands, I think, whether it's in the elements or not, Pullman, Washington is about as bad at elements as you're
Yes.
probably going to get in sort of major college football. Certainly more than anywhere in the SEC or probably in the Big 12 even. But I think everything I heard was really positive about him from the people who've been around him. So the concentration drops, I think you could say that about almost every receiver in the draft to some
Mm-hmm.
degree. So I think he's going to be a really good player. I'm not saying he is going to be Deion Branch or Julian Edelman, but I think he's going to be a really good player for them.
You know anything about Efton Chism, Eastern
Sadly,
Washington?
I do because he ate up the Big Sky Conference, and he's also at a school that has produced a lot of good players. And he broke some of Cooper Kupp's records. He was the kind of guy, and this is what's different in college football now, where you kind of know who a lot of the FCS guys are, just in case they end up in the portal somewhere. I'm not saying he is kind of built like Julian Edelman, to be
He
honest.
looks like Edelman when I'm sure we'll run some clips here, but he looks like Edelman with the ball in his hands.
Yeah, and he's really strong. I mean, I would guess Julian might be a little more straight line fast.
Mm-hmm.
Both guys I think probably had, I don't know if his like Edelman's shuttle time was in the high threes. I think Chisholm's was probably, I know coming out of high school what it was. That
It,
was the one thing. It was like 4.18 or
it
something
was
like that.
4.06.
4.06. Yeah, I knew it was really, really good. He's more quick than fast, but he is really strong. And I think that I'm not surprised he didn't get drafted, but I wouldn't have been surprised if he did, because he's not small at all, and
No, 5'10", 200.
yeah, he's a little bit like a running back out there, and I think that he was really prolific in the Big Sky. He has a track background. Now, it wasn't like a track background like an insane like high level track background, but he did a lot of stuff, and I think he'll be interesting to watch in training camp for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Shador Sanders, obviously, his story dominated the weekend. We've had Albert Breer on, throughout helping with our TV coverage. And what he kept circling back to is, as we talked to him, he kept saying, I just haven't talked to anyone in the last month who looks at him as an outstanding layup first round prospect. He says, I'm having a hard time finding anyone who says he's a first round prospect at this juncture. And in reading your excellent article post draft, you kind of indicated the same thing. There wasn't loathing of Shador Sanders. It was just misgivings about just how ready he was to be at the head of a depth chart.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that jump out. One, there's really no elite traits there. His arm is fine, but it's not a big, strong arm. It's not in the category of Cam Ward. Cam Ward. His athleticism is okay. Like he's fairly elusive in the pocket, but he's a high 4.7, 4.8 guy. He's not super big. And the things that give people pause were that he took a lot of sacks and he held on to the football way too long. They didn't love the offense he played. Yeah, Pat Shurmur came from the NFL, but that's not the offense, kind of style of offense he was heading to run at Colorado there. The other thing that I think is relevant, and this is some of the stuff that I had in my draft takeaways column today, was I heard from multiple people. It's like it's so important, the chemistry of a quarterback room in the NFL and how guys fit in. And I'm not, Shador didn't account himself great in the draft process. I don't think people loved that a guy who wasn't a surefire first rounder turn down the Senior Bowl, didn't do anything basically at the NFL Combine. I mean, so I think people felt like there was an overvalue of what his worth was, and there weren't that many teams that were going to need a quarterback to begin with. Obviously, the Giants were one, the Browns were another. You could certainly, obviously, the Titans were going to take who they were going to take at the top of the draft. But then you started getting to like teams who may take a quarterback of the future. Maybe that's the Rams, maybe that's the Seahawks. But I think this is the part where it didn't help him was, does Matthew Stafford do you worry about how Matthew Stafford feels about having him in the quarterback room? I mean, not to say he's a bad guy, but just like, this is a guy who's been the star everywhere he's been. He's had YouTube, cameras around him the whole time. I just think it's a different dynamic. So we'll see how he does in Cleveland. It's a low investment with the 144th pick. He was the second quarterback they drafted. I'm not sure anybody thought he was going to go that 2 rounds behind Dylan Gabriel, who's a smaller quarterback from Oregon, but that's what happened. And we'll see if he can prove a lot of people wrong now.
Bruce, cannot thank you enough for the time you spent with us and your coverage all the way through. You ever need anything from us, I can't imagine what it'd be, but we're right here for you.
I appreciate it. It's always good to have in my back pocket.
See, good. All right. Thanks again, Bruce Feldman from The Athletic.